Hello everyone, my name is Rajni Jha. Welcome to PIB Weekly Analysis at Drishti IAS. In today's session, we are going to discuss some of the most important pieces of news from 10th of August to 16th of August from PIB. Let's get started. The first piece of news that we have is EFIR under BNSS. Section 173 of the BNSS, that is Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Samhita 2023, deals with the information related to cognizable offences. Now, the question is, what is cognizable offence? A cognizable offence is the offence for which the police can arrest a person without a warrant or without any prior permission from a magistrate. So these are some of the serious offences. Serious offences. For example, rape, murder, robbery, kidnapping, etc. So you can understand it like this. Cognizable means police can take cognizance, that is direct action without any prior order, warrant or any permission. Now, information about a cognizable offence can be given according to this orally or through electronic communication. What does that mean? This information, the informant or the victim can inform about this offence either orally or electronically. That means he or she can tell the police officer what has happened orally. Through electronic communication, as the name suggests, this means he or she can send the information through electronic communication, right? It can be given irrespective of the area where the offence was committed. This is a type of zero FIR type jurisdictional flexibility. What does that mean? What is zero FIR type jurisdiction? That means, let's say an offence is committed in Mumbai, but the victim right now is in Delhi. So the victim can approach the police in Delhi and give all the information about the offence, and the police will record all the information given by the victim or the informant and then give all that information to the police in Mumbai. So why is it important? What significance does it hold? It is important. The purpose is so that the victim should not be made to run from one police station to another police station simply because it is out of jurisdiction, right? Next, whether the information is given orally or through electronic communication, the signature signed by the informant is what makes it legal or formal. So in case of electronic communication, if information is submitted electronically, it must be signed by the informant within 3 days. Now this is important. It must be signed by the informant within 3 days. Only after being signed by the informant is this sort of taken as a formal information, right? That this becomes legit only after it is signed. So that this is done so that authentication of the informant can be done. Otherwise, electronically, anybody could have given the information, right? Similarly, when we talk about orally, if the information is given orally, then the police officer will reduce it on the paper. The police officer will write it on the paper, and then the informant must sign the written information. This signing of written information makes this a formal written record. Next is Lokayan 2026 INS Sudarshini. Before we delve into the report, let's try to understand it a little bit so that when you see this news Lokayan or INS Sudarshini, you have some idea of what it is talking about, right? So if I break the word Lokayan, it is made from Lok and Ayan, right? Lok is people or world, because world is filled with people. People, public, or world is Lok. So let's say this is world, right? And Ayan or Ayan, it is movement or journey. This is journey or movement. So Lokayan is actually a journey around the world. Lok is world, Ayan is journey. So this is journey around the world. Whose journey around the world? Navy's, Indian Navy's journey around the world. So if you hear the word Lokayan, you should remember that it refers to Indian Navy's journey around the world, which combines three important things. Now this is the part where you should specially pay attention. I'll write it down here. It combines three very important things. First is naval training. Naval training. I will explain this as well. So the first is naval training, which means that trainees develop practical skills while sailing. So here on the ship, there will be trainees. So those trainees while sailing develop practical skills. They are given training as well, right? In sailing, navigation, seamanship, or life at sea. Second is maritime diplomacy. Maritime diplomacy. What does that mean? Maritime diplomacy is, as the name suggests, it is related to diplomacy. So this uh, port visits provide opportunity for diplomacy, which is interaction and cooperation with foreign navies. That is maritime diplomacy. And the third feature here is cultural outreach. Cultural outreach. What is cultural outreach? Again, as the name suggests, that this showcases India's culture, India's maritime culture, maritime heritage, and promotes India's goodwill. So this Lokayan 2026 is a trip around the world, journey around the world by Indian Navy, which ensures naval training, maritime diplomacy, and cultural outreach. I've already explained what does that mean, right? Now, when we talk about INS Sudarshini is one of the ships of this. So, INS Sudarshini is Indian Navy's sail training ship. That means it goes for sailing, yes, but at the same time, it is also providing training to the trainees. I told you this is the first part, right? Next, it entered Ponta Delgada, Azores, Portugal. Then it is a part of ongoing Lokayan 2026 voyage. I've already explained what is Lokayan. And this ship completed a challenging 19-day transoceanic crossing of Atlantic Ocean from Boston, USA. What does that mean? Transoceanic simply means it has crossed the ocean completely. Right, so it has crossed Atlantic Ocean completely. Now, this is not the first time that it has crossed Atlantic Ocean completely. This is the second time, as you can see here. But what this line simply means is this ship has completed a 19-day cruise, a 19-day sailing from one side of the Atlantic Ocean to the other. So this means this has crossed from Boston to Atlantic Ocean to now Ponta Delgada in Portugal. Right. Next, during the port visit, it engaged with Portuguese Navy. Why would it engage with Portuguese Navy? I told you the idea is training is one thing, yes, that is provided for our trainees, but this is for the foreign navies. So for maritime diplomacy, what is maritime diplomacy? As you can see here, professional interactions. Interactions is a part of diplomacy, and cultural outreach, so cultural exchanges, the same thing. Now, this visit aims to strengthen, of course, this will strengthen India-Portugal maritime cooperation and showcase India's maritime heritage, as I've already explained. And at the same time, this serves as floating ambassador of India's maritime heritage and goodwill. What does that mean? Why is it called floating ambassador? See, what is the purpose of an ambassador of India? The purpose of an ambassador of India is to represent India, right? And showcase India's heritage, build goodwill, strengthen diplomatic relations. Now, because this ship is doing all these things, it is called floating ambassador because it is a ship and it is floating. So it is called floating ambassador. So because since it ensures that it represents India, showcases India's maritime heritage, builds goodwill, and strengthens diplomatic relations, it is also called floating ambassador of India's heritage and goodwill. The next piece of news that we have is MMDR Amendment Bill 2026. Now, what is MMDR? MMDR is Mines and Minerals Development and Regulation Amendment Bill 2026. As the name suggests, it is an amendment bill. That means there must be an act before this as well. So, the original act is MMDR Act 1957, and MMDR Act 1957 governs mining and mineral development in India. Now, this original 1957 Act, under the section 2 of this act, it is mentioned that the union has control over regulation of mines and development of mines. This is about development and regulation. So union will have control over the development and regulation of mine according to this. Now we know for a fact minerals are strategically very important. Why? For infrastructure, manufacturing, digital technologies, and also energy security. Right? Now, this was about 1957, but why are we seeking amendment in this? We have come up with an amendment bill which has been passed by both the houses. Again, this part also you will remember. It has already been passed by both the houses, but why do we seek amendment in this? We seek amendment in this. For that, you need to understand what are the loopholes here. What were the loopholes in MMDR Act 1957? Now, see, in that there were multiple taxes. There were multiple taxes, cess and levies by different states. In fact, across the states also there was no uniformity. There was non-uniform taxation across states. There was retrogressive taxation. What does that mean? That simply means, so for example, there is a tax system that has been introduced in 2026, retrospective taxation, I'm sorry. In 2026, it has been implemented. Now, if it is retrospective taxation, that would mean in 2024, if somebody did mining, this taxation will apply to them also. So they'll have to pay extra. And that is obviously wrong, because at that time, if a company started mining, they would have done it by making the budget according to the then taxation system. So retrospective taxation makes it compulsory that whatever taxation system is done today will also be implemented in the past. So in this, there was retrospective taxation as well. At the same time, high compliance cost, cascading taxation was there, higher mining cost was there. If there are such high compliance cost, higher mining cost, because of all of this, what will happen? Some of them, for some of the companies, it will not be viable. So they will shut down. If they shut down, then our dependence on import will increase furthermore, right? So these were the problems here. At the same time, because of this uncertainty, because we don't know what kind of tax will be implemented when, because of all of this uncertainty, investment was going down. So again, it would increase our dependence on the imports. So these were the loopholes. Now, because of these loopholes, this amendment bill has been introduced. In this main idea of this would be to tackle the uncertainty here. There is a lot of uncertainty in this MMDR Act 1957. So this bill amends MMDR Act 1957 to create uniform and predictable fiscal framework, right? Predictable taxation for mining. Now, there is another section here, new section 9D, according to which states cannot impose taxes, cess, or levies on mineral rights or mineral bearing lands, except when it is subjected by central government. So, if central government allows, if they prescribe the conditions, then they can impose taxes, otherwise they can't. Because as we have seen in MMDR 1957, here the taxes were very haphazard, they were very non-uniform, uncertain. So because of that, this change has been made in the new section 90 has been introduced, and this change has been made. We saw there was retrospective taxation. So because of all of that uncertainty, this has been introduced that states cannot impose taxes, cess, or levies on the mineral rights or mineral bearing lands, the lands in which minerals are there, unless conditions prescribed by central government. So here, as we can see, that the union has expanded its control over these mineral bearing lands, and whatever pending retrospective state levies were there, they become invalid. What does that mean? The same example that I gave you, that a taxation, let's say, was imposed in 2026, and they say that it has to be imposed retrospectively. That would mean in 2024, if a company did the mining of these minerals, they will also have to pay those extra money, the extra money, because of the new taxation system, right? So what they are saying is, whatever money you have already paid, we are not going to return you those, but you don't have to pay anything extra. So whatever pending retrospective state levies are there, pending one only, they become invalid. They don't have to pay now, but whatever has already been collected will not be returned. Then there is a section 13 here, again, that makes the power of center, the hold of center, stronger in this case. So center gets power to prescribe rules and conditions for the levies by the state, right? What is the significance of this? Greater fiscal certainty. Now see, because now the taxation system, taxation or cess, is more certain, so there is fiscal certainty. If the taxation is certain, now the companies know, okay, this is what you have to pay and this will not be changed. This is not uncertain, this is not non-uniform. So in that case, it will attract more investment. If there is more investment, then more companies will go for mineral exploration. If there are more mineral exploration exercises, we'll get more minerals, will find more minerals, right? So that will ensure critical mineral security and also reduce our dependence on the imports. That is why this is significant for us. Next piece of news that we have is ship recycling in India. India became the world's first ship recycling nation in 2025. Let's first understand this and then we will read the news. So, in ship recycling, what happens is, let's say there is a ship that has become very old and denuded. Now, that ship will be brought to a port, especially in India. You have to remember that is Alang in Gujarat, very important. because it is world's largest ship recycling hub and it accounts for around 98% of India's activity on this port, right? So in ship recycling, the old denudated ships are brought on the port, in this case Alang, and then its parts are removed, and whatever are the parts that can be reused, like engine or motor or whatever, those parts which can be reused, they are recycled and reused. At the same time, if there are any hazardous particles there, they will be also removed, they will be cleaned first, and then the parts will be recycled and reused, right? So that is what is ship recycling. Some parts can obviously be reused. Now this is a part of circular economy. I've told you about this phrase earlier as well. What is circular economy? Now, circular economy would be normally what you do is you buy something, right? Right? And then you use it and then you throw it, right? I'm talking about on a micro level, on a very small level. On the economy level, this also happens. You bought or made something, you used it, you threw it. But circular economy is, let's say you made something, you bought something, you used it, and then you recycled it. Then you reused it. So in this case, this is circular economy. In this case, what happens is the wastage is reduced. A product is used for a long time. Since it is used for a long time, its wastage will be reduced, and this is a part of circular economy. So ship recycling is a part of circular economy. Now let's look at the news. It says India became world's first number one ship recycling nation, not the first, number one ship recycling nation in 2025. Global share rose 30.1% to 35.4%, while recycling volume increased from 1.86 to 2.99 million gigaton. Is the number important for us? This number, not very much, but we should know that we became world's number one ship recycling nation. And the sport you should remember for your exam, right? That around 98% of India's activity is done here. Now this is a part of Maritime India Vision 2030. So Maritime India Vision 2030 target was there, which we achieved 5 years ahead of schedule. 5 years ahead of schedule because of this, right? Now, what is the legal framework? There are some legal frameworks for this. First legal framework for this is Ship Recycling Act 2019, which is the main legal framework, and DG Shipping is the national authority. Sometimes the names are asked. Then there is Ship Recycling Act Rules 2021. This was in 2019, the Act in 2019, rules in 2021. This basically focuses on technical and procedural requirements. Then there is Ship Recycling Regulations 2026, 2019, 2021 and 2026. This is for stronger safety, environment and monitoring standards. Now there is one more legal framework, which is inventory of hazardous material. This is also another legal framework. I told you in recycling, whatever hazardous substances are there, they are removed. They are identified and then removed. Those substances are removed so that recycling can be done properly. So according to this, it identifies hazardous substances before recycling is done. Now, India is aligned with Hong Kong International Convention. In this case, Hong Kong International Convention, which came into force in 26th June 2025. As you can see here, there is assistance provided. This part is not very important for us. This is important. Then there is Ship Breaking Credit Note Scheme. What is that? Credit of 40% of recycled ship scrap value. So whatever scrap is created, whatever scrap we get from recycling, the 40% of the recycled ship scrap value is credited, usable up to 5% of the value of the new vessel built in India. What is the significance of all of this? The significance is it promotes circular economy, as I've already told you. Steel or resources recovery is done, of course, because in recycling you recover whatever parts are viable and can be used again, and you are anyway getting credit also for this. Lower energy use is done, emission is lower, employment is high, because whenever you create any service area, you create any area of work for that matter, employment is generated, resource security is there, reduced marine pollution is there, of course, because we are reusing the same material, recycling and reusing the same material, there is less pollution that is created rather than if we threw everything, all the parts. If we threw all the parts, if we threw the entire ship, there will be more pollution that would be generated, right? So the marine pollution is also reduced in this case. Okay, next part is DRI Areca nut import case. All right, let's look at the news first. Directorate of Revenue Intelligence uncovered areca nuts are supari in Hindi. Directorate of Revenue Intelligence uncovered a network fraudulently using SAFTA benefits to import areca nuts. Let's understand this news first and then we will see what is given in the news, right? Okay, so what was happening? What were fraudster doing? Let me explain to you that. Now, according to SAFTA, SAFTA is a free trade agreement. South Asian Free Trade Agreement. I will just write it here. South Asian Free Trade Agreement. What does that mean? This means all the SAARC country, they will get free trade agreement, right? That certain goods coming from SAARC countries will get free trade agreement, so they don't have to pay custom duties. There will be custom duty exemption according to SAFTA. So in this news specifically, what they have dealt with, I'll tell you that. Under SAFTA, certain goods coming from Bangladesh would get a full custom duty exemption. So there were eligible imports from Bangladesh that would get full custom duty exemption, and this areca nut is one of them. So what the fraudsters would do, they didn't actually buy areca nuts from Bangladesh. Rather than doing that, they bought it from, say, Indonesia or Malaysia, right? So they bought it from Indonesia, Malaysia, and then they would route it in such a way that after Indonesia, it will come to Bangladesh, where they'll do the repackaging, right? And then they will send it to India. So because it is repackaged, they change the containers, bags to make them appear that it was Bangladeshi. And because Bangladesh comes under that SAFTA, and because of that, eligible imports they require, they get full customs duty exemption. So they didn't have to pay any customs duty on this. Whereas normally areca nuts attract 100% basic customs duty. That what does that mean? If the price is 100 rupees, they'll have to pay 100 rupees customs duty on that, 100% basic customs duty. So by this route, this fraudulent route, they were avoiding 100% customs duty on everything, right? On how much ever they were importing from, by saying that they were from Bangladesh, right? These areca nuts. So this is what was going on. Now, genuine Southeast Asian import, they have 100% duty, but falsely declared Bangladeshi import, because of SAFTA exemption, they will have zero duty. So what they did is DRI, Directorate of Revenue Intelligence, they uncovered this fraudulent network. Normally, areca nuts attract 100% basic custom duty, as I've already explained. This I've already explained. This provided that, okay, yeah, very important, rules of origin. What is rules of origin? So like I told you that Bangladeshi areca nuts will have full customs duty exemption. You don't have to pay any customs duty on it, but you'll have to satisfy the rules of origin. What is rules of origin? Basically, you show that it is from here only. It is made or it is grown in Bangladesh. That is rules of origin. Where was it originated? Right? The syndicate actually sourced areca nuts from Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, and other Southeast Asian countries, and then falsely declared them as Bangladeshi origin. As I've told you, because of this fraudulent network was created. It was later found out, and this caused estimate loss of over 2,500, that is 2,500 crore to us. DRI also seized around 160 million tons of areca nuts and 75 lakh cash. 9 persons were arrested. Custom broker's license was suspended. And investigation also found the use of Hawala channels and dummy entities. What are Hawala channels and dummy entities? Hawala channels are, dummy entities are fake or shell corporations, like shell companies, created to hide the real people or the real owner of the company, that is dummy entity. And Hawala channels are informal, unregulated system where money is transferred by informal channels, not by formal banking channels, but by informal channels. Of course, there would be fraudulent channels only. So these were also found. What is important for us here? Important for us is SAFTA. Important for us is the customs duty exemption given here. That you have to understand. That is it. And Hawala channels and dummy entities, what are those? That you should understand. Okay, next. Next piece of news that we have is National Biodiversity Authority. It released 15.52 crore as excess and benefit sharing proceeds from Pioneer Overseas Cooperation, which developed 10 hybrid mustard varieties using Indian biological resources. Let's first understand this and then we'll get into the news. Now, this National Biodiversity Authority ensures that when a company uses India's biological, when a company uses India's biological resources for commercial purposes, biological resources for commercial purposes, then the benefits are shared. It just simply means these, that if the Indian biological resources are used for commercial purposes, because these biological resources would have been conserved by, let's say, a community, right? It would have been grown by a community. It would have been conserved by the efforts of the government. So, whenever a company uses biological resources for commercial purposes, they should, of course, share the benefit. They got benefit. They got, first of all, they got access and they got benefit. So, that should be shared. That's what it means, right? So NBA released 15.52 crore as access and benefit sharing proceeds from Pioneer Overseas Corporation. This is the corporation that used biological resources to create 10 hybrid mustard varieties using Indian biological resources. So I hope you've understood the news now. Now, amount will be shared among 26 states, biodiversity boards, 3 UT biodiversity councils based on mustard cultivation. Important part here is Rajasthan gets the highest share as it accounts for 42%, approximately 42% of India's mustard cultivation. Now, where biological resources are obtained through intermediaries, for example, through farmers or community, if the original farmer or community, let's say you cannot find out the original farmer or community and you cannot give them the benefit, this access and benefit share, then you give that to the government. So if the farmer community cannot be identified, ABS is distributed among SBBs and UTBCs, basically the states and UTs where the resources is cultivated, right? Where the resources are cultivated. Okay. Next is ABS funds are used for biodiversity conservation. Now, obviously, this share, the benefit, access and benefit share that you have shared, that has been shared by the corporation or the company, that will be used for biodiversity conservation, people's biodiversity registers, ecosystem restoration. Basically, because we have done this from biological resource, we will use the money received to ensure that the biological resources are grown and conserved. So we will use that, right? It could be ecosystem restoration, strengthening biodiversity management communities, because all this will ensure that our biodiversity is saved, our biological resources are saved and conserved, right? Based on Biological Diversity Act 2002 and reflects on the Nagoya Protocol principle of fair and equitable benefit sharing. What is important for us here? In both biological, whether we are talking about Biological Diversity Act or Nagoya Protocol. So in Biological Diversity Act 2002, we have already talked about ABS, right? That there will be access and benefit sharing. Similarly, the Nagoya Protocol was an international agreement under CBD, that is Convention on Biological Diversity. It was an international agreement on Convention on Biological Diversity, and it had a principle of fair and equitable benefit sharing. So, if you have used natural resource, in this case biological resource, because growing and conserving a biological resource requires the efforts of the government, the community, everyone. So if you're getting benefit, you should be sharing that benefit. The benefit should be fair and equitable. And this is given according to the ABS of Biological Diversity Act 2002 and at the same time Nagoya Protocol principle of fair and equitable benefit sharing. At the same time, it is also linked to Target 13 of the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. What is this? This is a global biodiversity framework adopted in 2022. This coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework was adopted in 2022. Its Target 13 also talks about the same thing. It focuses on the monetary and non-monetary benefits that arose from the genetic resources, utilization of genetic resources, that those monetary and non-monetary benefits should be shared fairly and equitably. So all these three things, this is the legal framework. All these three things talk about the same thing, right? Okay. Statutory body under NBA is the statutory body under MOEFCC established under Biological Diversity Act 2002. This is important for us. These three legal frameworks you should know. Sometimes questions are asked from the legal frameworks. These you should know, right? What is the core concept here? That ABS ensures that commercial benefits from India's biological and genetic resources are shared fairly and contribute to conservation in local communities. This is what I have explained so far, that if you are using any biological resources, because for growing those biological resources, there's effort by the government, there's effort by the people, community. So if you are getting benefit from those biological resources, you should be sharing those benefits fairly and equitably. That's what this ABS is all about. Excess and benefit sharing is all about. Now, what is the important part here? Two things. First, what is excess and benefit sharing? Second, the legal frameworks that we saw. And the third would be Rajasthan gets the highest share of this because 42% of India's mustard cultivation is done in Rajasthan. So that you can remember. Next is World Elephant Day 2026. Now, World Elephant Day was on 12th of August. India hosts nearly 60% of world's wild Asian elephants. Now, before we talk about why World Elephant Day is so important for us, the important thing is why elephants matter. Why elephants are important. Now, that's more important. Let's understand that first. And there are a few pointers for this. For example, first is they shape forest. I'll explain it. They shape forest. How can they shape forests? See, when elephants walk or move, they break branches, vegetation, so they create clear pathways. Sometimes they dig the ground and create water resources, new water resources. So they shape the forests, right? Then they disperse seeds. They disperse seeds. So elephants, what they do is they eat fruits and plants, and the seeds of those fruits or plants that is there in their dung. So when they excrete, their dung carry those seeds of the fruits. And of course, if they have eaten, let's say they've eaten somewhere here, they'll just move somewhere else and then they will excrete, and the dung carries seeds. So there will be plants here as well, or those flowers or fruits here as well. So they act as natural seed disperser, right? They disperse the seeds naturally, which helps with forest regeneration, because if there are these plants are not here, they'll start growing here as well. So they act as natural seed dispersers, right? Then they help with nutrient cycling. They help with nutrient cycling. How? I've already told you that their dung carries nutrients, right? The seeds, their dung carries seeds, but at the same time, their dung also carries nutrients, and the nutrients are returned to the soil. Those nutrients supports insects and microorganisms. So elephant feeds, then moves, that leads to seed dispersal, but at the same time the dung also carries nutrient. So it ensures nutrient recycling. And at the same time, if you want to have healthy amount of elephants, you need connectivity. You need habitat connectivity. Habitat connectivity. Why is that so? Because for elephants, they have very large home ranges. What are home range? A home range means that an area where which an animal normally uses for food, water, shelter, or movement. Any area that an animal normally uses for food, water, shelter, and food, water, shelter, and mainly for movement, because animals, we know that they move from one side to another, right? That entire space is called the home range, and elephants have very large home range. So if you want to sustain elephants, they need connected forest wildlife corridors. If these forests become fragmented by, let's say, roads or railways or settlements, all these things, then elephants will struggle to move, because all of that is a part of their habitat. So the forest cannot be fragmented. So they ensure habitat connectivity, and because of all of this ensures that elephant saving, it is not about saving just one species, it is about maintaining a healthy ecosystem, forest ecosystem, and biodiversity. And this is the reason that they are also called keystone or foundational species. Keystone or foundational species. You will read in ecology. Foundational species. That if you want to save and conserve and have healthy amount of elephants, then you're not just saving one species, you're ensuring a habitat where different kinds of species can be accommodated, can grow, can survive, and can thrive. Right? Now let's look at the news. It says India hosts nearly 60% of world's wild Asian elephants. And according to the estimate, India's wild elephant population is 22,446. It is protected through 33 elephant reserves, 150 identified corridors. These elephant reserves cover 80,777 kilometers squares across 14 major elephant range states. So if you're preparing for your state exams, these numbers can be helpful. But these are just data statistics. There is nothing to explain here. Now, what is Project Elephant? Government's flagship elephant conservation project is Project Elephant, where we focus on habitat protection. As I've told you, if you want to protect the elephants, you have to ensure these things, and especially habitat connectivity. So you have to ensure that the habitat is protected. So this focuses on habitat protection, elephant reserves. Also, whenever we try to protect an animal, there is always a conflict, human animal conflict, human and that particular animal conflict, that also has to be resolved. So that is also ensured in this elephant Project Elephant. So human elephant conflict mitigation is ensured or focused on, at least. Captive elephant protection is done. Science and technology based monitoring is done. So as we have seen, just to ensure that the number stays healthy. Now here, important part is this used India's first DNA-based synchronized elephant census. What does that mean? That DNA was used, DNA profiling was used, block counts were used, line transect surveys were used in this estimate. Now, DNA, this was the first time that DNA was used to ensure the number was right. What is DNA profiling? So, for example, scientists collect samples of these elephant dung, right? Samples of the elephant dung, and then they are analyzed. The DNA from that are analyzed to identify individual elephants so that they don't end up counting the same elephant twice. So that is DNA profiling. What is block counts? Now the entire elephant habitat is divided into blocks or areas, and it is ensured that all the elephants from this block will be counted first, then this block will be counted first, again to ensure that there is no recounting, right? And then line transect. What is line transect? Line transect would mean that the survey team travel along a predetermined line. So this is the forest area and they have determined these are the lines. So they will only travel on the predetermined lines to figure out where the elephants are or to record their number. These observations are done so that the population can be estimated accurately. If there is double counting, that can be ensured because we have employed 3 different ways to count the numbers. So this was the first time that DNA-based synchronized elephant census was employed. Now, elephant corridors. According to Elephant Corridors of India 2023, we have in East Central, we have 52, North East 48, Southern 32, Northern 18, and West Bengal has the most. So even if you don't remember all of this, just remember this one. West Bengal has the most, that is 26. It includes 19 interstate and 6 transboundary, means along the boundaries also. So India-Nepal boundary, there are 6 Indian-Nepal boundary corridors. So there are 6 transboundary corridors, and of 150 corridors, 59 showed increased use, 29 are stable, 29 are declining, 15 are impaired. Do we need to remember all of this? No. What we need to understand is why elephant is a keystone species. When is Elephant Day, right? Then India has approximately 60% of world's wild Asian elephant. Then in this estimate, DNA-based synchronized elephant census was done for the first time. So that is why this is important. And West Bengal has the most number of elephant corridors. That's all you can remember. And maybe 6 transboundary corridors. That is enough. Next is, how can they be conserved? So I've already explained, but there are some legal frameworks. Let's just go through them. These are very data driven and statistics driven and very factual driven. So there's nothing to explain here. We have understood the basic concept. Now let's go through this one. So there is MEE Framework 2023 for elephant reserves. Initially it was tested in 4 reserves. Then it was expanded nationally with CAMPA funding. Then regional action plans are also developed. Railway safety is ensured. So surveys covered 127 sensitive stretches. So railway safety is ensured. Elephant deaths from train collision fell from 26 in 2003 to 12. So 50%, approximately more than 50% decline is there in elephants' death from train collisions also. Then captive elephants, there is Gaj Suchna. Gaj Suchna maintains a national genetic database of registered captive elephants. You will remember this. So Suchna is when you inform something. Gaj is elephant, right? So you have information about the elephant. So Gaj Suchna is a national genetic database where registered captive elephants are mentioned, right? Next is captive elephants transfer or transport rules 2024. They regulate the movement of these elephants. That is a legal framework here. Now, I also talked about in the project Elephant, I talked about human elephant conflict, that whenever you try to conserve or protect an animal, you also have to make sure that the human and animal conflict is properly tackled with, right? So there is provision for this as well. Government provides compensation including 10 lakh for death or permanent incapacitation, 2 lakh for grievous injury, and 25,000 up to 25,000 for minor injury treatment. Human Wildlife Conflict Advisory and 2023 elephant specific guidelines, they promote hotspot mapping, rapid response team, faster compensation, and all of that is ensured in human elephant conflict. Okay, let's move on to the next part, which is Saptdhara for Viksit Bharat. Now, this is important because it was given on the Independence Day. So, on the 80th Independence Day address, in that address, of course, 15th August 2026, Red Fort vision was Viksit Bharat 2047. The PM talked about next level reforms. So, continuous reforms by center, state, industry, that we should focus on continuous reform, right? By all of them, and they should be aligned with 2047, which is Viksit Bharat 2047 aspirations. Now, Saptadhara is 7 priority sectors. This is something you will remember. You can use in your mains answer writing. Just remember the sectors. That is more than sufficient. So, what are the sectors? Manufacturing sector, agricultural sector, technology. So, in technology, AI, quantum, space, robotics, etc. Then Gati Shakti. Gati is movement. Speed is Gati. So, it is related to the vehicles that ensure movement like rail, road, waterways, airports. So, Gati Shakti, defense, these are 5 different priority sectors. 2 more are green and blue economy. Green economy would focus on green hydrogen, renewable energy. Blue economy will focus on water bodies, right? The economy related to sea or ocean or water bodies. So, fisheries, coastal tourism, ocean technology. And the 7th is soft power. So, what you need to remember is these 7 priority sectors. Now, if I ask you what is soft power, what is soft power? Soft power is the country's ability to and attract, influence and attract other countries through its culture, values, idea, reputation, rather than military forces or economic force, right? So, soft power is one of the priority sectors. Then, what is the global ambition? We are aiming for 50 Indian Fortune 500 companies. So, 50 Indian Fortune 500 companies, a top 5 global bank and pharma companies, Indian quality, making sure that Indian quality is competitive in the international market also, quality, reliability, competitiveness, global hallmark of Indian product, they should be the global hallmark of Indian products. MSME should also expand exports, work culture, achieve in the next 5 to 7 years whatever we have not been able to achieve in the last over decade. So they are saying we should have a work culture to achieve something in next 5 to 7 years that remained unfinished over the last decade. Then Nasha Mukt Bharat, we have talked about this repeatedly because it keeps coming up in PIB. We have talked about this in previous sessions also. So Nasha Mukt Bharat, as the name suggests, we are trying to make India intoxication free. So this is a 100-week campaign. Every family urged to participate so that it can make India Nasha Mukt, right, or intoxication free. Then women reservation was also focused on here, implement 33% reservation under Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam. Again, you can use this in your answer writing. Just this one line will suffice in the answer writing. Then youth and census should also be focused on that. Youth should be urged to ensure accurate participation in the ongoing census, because if you have the correct data of census, the programs or the schemes are brought about according to the census, right? So was urged to participate in this census accurately, right? Next, nation above self, reaffirming Panch Pran, Panch Pran, and called for duty and interest, national interest to guide citizen. So there are Panch Pran which have been focused here. The Panch Pran, what are those Panch Pran? You will tell me in the comment section below. Panch Pran are 5 different sort of affirmations, you can say, pledges. Pran are pledges. So there are 5 pledges that are focused on. If you don't know about it, you Google it, find it, read about it, because it has been said in this, one second, because it has been said in this address, Independence Day address, it becomes very important. Panch Pran. What are those Panch Pran or pledges, right? I can tell you this much. This is about putting oneself, putting nation above oneself. And it has Viksit Bharat, or you can have unity. I've given you two, pride in the heritage. The rest two you will tell me. So I've given you 3 out of 5. First is Viksit Bharat, to resolve to make India a developed nation. Second, pride in our heritage. Take pride in India's cultural tradition. And unity. Focus on India's unity and solidarity, right? And the next two you will tell me. Okay, the last piece of news that we have is Jal Jeevan Mission was initially launched on 15th August 2019. Ministry was Jal Shakti. What is the aim of this Jal Jeevan Mission? What does that mean? That means safe, adequate and regular drinking water to be available in all the houses through functional taps. So functional household tap connections. Rural tap water coverage increased from 16.72% to 82.24%. Then this number is not very important for us. This is important. Har Ghar Jal certification. In this, there is Har Ghar Jal certification, which means that in that particular district or that particular block, every household, almost every household has got this functional household tap connection. So they have water availability, right? So there are 188 districts like this, 1090 blocks, 1.01 lakh gram panchayat and 2.04 lakh villages which have Har Ghar Jal certification. Then tap connections reached 90.86% schools and approximately 86% Anganwadi centers. Now, this JJM, that is Jal Jeevan Mission, provides 55 liters per person per day of prescribed quality water. Now, see here the quality is mentioned, BIS, Indian Standard, 1500 on a regular long-term basis. Okay. Now, this is Jal Jeevan Mission. Now, why is this important for us? Is because we have Jal Jeevan Mission 2.2. What is that? The focus here is not just on providing Jal. It is not just on creating infrastructure, rather ensuring service delivery, sustainability and community ownership. So here we are not focusing only on providing or ensuring tap water in every household. Rather than that, we are ensuring on service delivery, that there is sustainability, there is community ownership. So what are we focusing on here is groundwater recharge and rainwater harvesting, grey water management, water conservation, groundwater management and water conservation, village level water security planning, greater role of panchayats. Obviously, the community has to participate, then only we can ensure this, right? Water quality monitoring through laboratories and field testing kits. Now, this JJM is extended till December 2028. An important initiative here is Jal Sanchay Jal Bhagidari, which is catch the rain. In this Jal Sanchay Jal Bhagidari, the part is catch the rain. So catching the rain means we are catching the rain. So that means we are harvesting rainwater, right? So this focuses on harvesting rainwater, because right now we are not only focusing on giving water, we are also focusing on giving quality water. So this mainly focuses on harvesting rainwater and recharging groundwater. So this was launched on 1st June 2026. What will be the impact? The impact will be, it will reduce the burden of fetching water, particularly for women and girls, because we know in many remote areas, women and girls still walk kilometers to get water from distant places, right? So this will reduce the burden of fetching water on particularly for women and girls and improve access to education, livelihoods, health, hygiene and dignity. Now, before we move to the last part of our session, I would like to tell you one thing. Right now, we have our world mapping series coming up. So we will have our world mapping series, world mapping continent series every Wednesday and Saturday, 7 p.m. sharp. This will simplify world geography for you with Drishti IAS English channel. So please do watch this every Wednesday and Saturday at 7 p.m. sharp. Now, the last part of our session, which is a prelims practice question. Question number 1 says, with reference to section 173 of the Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Samhita 2023, consider the following statements. First, Information relating to a cognizable offense may be given orally or through electronic communication. Second, electronic information must be signed by informant within 3 days. And third, information can be given only at the police station having territorial jurisdiction over the place where the offense occurred. Now, I've explained this to you very clearly, so I'm sure you will give me the right answer. The options are, which you have to tell me which is correct here, right? So the options are A, 1 and 2, B, 2 and 3, C, 1 and 3, or D, 1, 2 and 3. And finally, the last question of the day, which is with reference to MMDR, this is question number 2. With reference to MMDR Amendment Bill 2026, consider the following statements. First, it seeks to create a uniform, predictable fiscal framework for the mineral sector. Second, it introduces a new Section 9D concerning state taxes, cess, and levies on mineral rights or mineral bearing lands. And third, it completely removes the role of the central government in prescribing conditions relating to such state levies. You have to tell me which of these is correct. Option A, 1 and 2 only, B, 2 only, C, 1 and 3 only, or D, 1, 2 and 3 only. So that's it for today's session. Thank you so much for joining in. I really hope that you enjoyed the lecture. Until next time, take care.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.